Couldn't stop him. He keeps going forward. He doesn't quit. He's the most resilient, hard-working man I've ever met in my life. His family are incredible people. This is karma, ladies and gentlemen. He deserves this. They deserve it as a family.
There was a time when the UFC was dying. It had no TV deals, no sponsorships. It was banned in most of the country, mocked, dismissed, labeled human cockfighting. No arena wanted to host it. Politicians wanted it gone. It was a blood sport with no future. And just when it seemed like the UFC would vanish from existence, a billionaire from Queens made a phone call that changed everything. Today, the UFC is a multi-billion-dollar empire. It sells out stadiums, runs global events, and has its own streaming network. It's a pillar of modern sports entertainment. But none of that. No McGregor. No Khabib. No Abu Dhabi cards or $10 billion valuations would have happened without Donald Trump. This is not about politics. This is about business and the forgotten moment when Trump saved the UFC from collapse. Let's rewind to the late 1990s. The UFC was on life support. Pay-per-view numbers were flat. Politicians were cracking down hard. The sport had no weight classes, no gloves, and no rules worth respecting. John McCain led a full-blown campaign to ban it, calling it a brutal spectacle. 36 states outlawed it. It was a political punching bag and a regulatory nightmare. TV networks wouldn't touch it. Sponsors disappeared. And even the most desperate venues refused to book events. In a world dominated by polished sports like the NFL and NBA, MMA looked like a bad VHS tape you weren't supposed to watch. Then, in 2001, Dana White, a former aerobics instructor turned manager, convinced childhood friends Lorenzo and Frank Fertitta to buy the UFC for $2 million. The Fertittas were casino royalty. They owned station casinos in Las Vegas and had deep political connections.
Tomorrow, local gaming empire Station Casinos celebrates 40 years in business. The Fertitta family, who founded and pioneered locals gaming, is still at the helm of this gaming force today.
But even they couldn't get the UFC on TV. They bled money. Over $40 million lost in the first few years. Fighters were getting paid in the hundreds, sometimes less. It was a dream built on nothing but stubbornness. And yet, the UFC needed just one thing to turn the corner: legitimacy. They needed someone powerful to say, "This is real. This matters." That's when Donald Trump stepped in. At the time, Trump wasn't a politician. He was a brand. Skyscrapers, casinos, red carpets, and tabloids. He had the Trump Taj Mahal in Atlantic City, a flashy casino with ballrooms, spotlights, and empty weekends to fill. Dana White called. He was used to being told no. No venues, no dates, no thanks. But Trump said yes, let's do it. The Taj Mahal didn't just host UFC 30, it embraced it. Trump didn't ask for a crazy rental fee. He didn't treat the fighters like criminals. He treated them like athletes, professionals, men with a future. And it wasn't just the venue. Trump himself showed up, sat front row, shook hands. He gave them a platform, a place that felt like prime time, even when the rest of the world thought they were a joke. For the first time, the UFC didn't look like a sideshow. It looked like a sport. That one move changed everything. Media began paying attention. Fighters started believing. Future investors saw a glimpse of what could be. That was the first domino, the one that would eventually lead to The Ultimate Fighter reality show. That show, filmed on a tight budget and broadcast on Spike TV, saved the UFC. But the UFC only got to that point because Trump kept the dream alive long enough. Dana White never forgot. In every interview, every podcast, he repeats it. Donald Trump was the first guy who believed in us, the first guy who gave us a shot. Their relationship didn't stop there. Over the years, Trump and Dana kept in touch. Trump would call to congratulate Dana after big events. Dana would attend Trump's casinos and functions. It was more than business, it was loyalty. When Trump announced he was running for president, most of the sports world stayed silent, but Dana didn't. He walked into the Republican National Convention and stood at the podium, not as a politician, not as a Republican, as a man honoring a debt. To Dana, it was simple. When someone gives you a shot when nobody else will, you don't forget that. And he didn't. Now imagine if Trump hadn't taken that call. Imagine Trump had passed on the UFC, said it was too risky, too violent, too messy. What happens next? The UFC can't find a venue. UFC 30 never happens. The Fertitta brothers, already $10 million in the hole, pull the plug. No Spike TV deal, no Ultimate Fighter, no breakout moment, no redemption arc, no Chuck Liddell, no Anderson Silva, no Ronda Rousey, no McGregor, no UFC 300, no global expansion, no ESPN deal, no UFC Performance Institute, no billion-dollar sale to Endeavor. The entire sport of MMA becomes a footnote, a remember when in sports documentaries. Maybe it survives in Japan, Maybe it clings to life in Brazil, but it never becomes this. Instead, MMA would have remained underground, niche, chaotic, ignored. That's what one no could have caused. But instead, Trump said yes. That's why to this day, you'll see his face backstage. That's why some of the toughest men in the world nod in respect when his name comes up. Because love him or hate him, Donald Trump helped build the octagon. He didn't just rent a ballroom. He didn't just show up. He gave them the one thing money can't buy in sports: credibility. And when you think about what the UFC has become, the fastest growing sports brand on the planet with pay-per-view giants, global reach, and billion-dollar mergers, it all traces back to one early yes. A yes that no one else was willing to say. History doesn't always change with a knockout. Sometimes it changes with a handshake behind the scenes. This was one of those moments, because without Trump, there might not be a UFC.